Hey guys, just a quick video on Fable 5, which I think is an incredible model. It is a giant leap ahead of where Opus 4.8 was. That's what the benchmarks showed, and that's also what my personal experience was as well. So as an example, there was an app I was trying to build with Opus 4.8. I tried on max effort. I even tried the new UltraCode feature and just couldn't pull it off. But Fable 5 on medium effort was able to build that app. I'm not going to say what the app was because it's still in development. I don't want anyone to copy it, but it was a pretty technically complex app. So that if you're wondering what the hype is about with Fable 5, there's definitely a lot behind that hype. But there's just one problem with this model, and I'll get to that in a sec. Just some quick context though for those who don't know these facts yet. You might have heard of the Claude Mythos model, which was getting lots of attention in the media for it being too dangerous to release. And there's been speculation as to whether Fable 5 is Mythos or not. And to clarify that for you, I can tell you that it is Mythos 5. It basically is Mythos 5, but with extra safety restrictions. But under the hood, it's the same model as Mythos. Same weights, the only difference is the safeguards. And Anthropic calls it Mythos class. It's probably because they don't flat out want to say they're releasing Mythos, but really they are releasing Mythos. The other difference, of course, is the pricing. It's about double the cost of Opus 4.8. So that's one catch with this model, is that it is twice as expensive. But because it's so much better at complex tasks, it will probably cost you less than Opus 4.8 on very complex tasks that Opus 4.8 just struggles with and needs many iterations. Whereas Fable 5, as some of you might have seen, can one-shot entire apps, even entire 3D worlds. So in those instances, it might very well be about the same cost or even cheaper. That's something I'll have to look into. I'll have to benchmark later on. But once again, from my own testing, there was a real app I was trying to build, a very technically complex app involving LiDAR on the iPhone and the face detection, etc. And Opus 4.8 Max failed for days. So over the span of many days, I tried to get Opus 4.8 on max effort to get it done. And by the way, I'm on the 20x max plan, so I had plenty of usage. I even threw UltraCode at it. That's basically a max effort, but with multi-agents, and that still failed. But Fable 5 was able to build that app in one session, which really blew my mind. But I wasn't too surprised given the hype around Mythos being too powerful to release. It then made sense to me as to why it was too powerful to release without safeguards. So that's probably one of the cleanest comparisons I can give you. And the benchmarks back it up, and they're very reflective of what you will experience. So on the FrontierCode Diamond benchmark, which is one of the more advanced coding benchmarks and one of the tougher ones, Fable 5 scored almost 30%, more than double what Opus 4.8 scored, and more than 6 times what GPT 5.5 scored. So although it's double the cost of Opus 4.8, because it's twice as powerful for complex tasks, like I said, that's one reason why it would very likely cost you the same as if you were to use Opus. But it's quite mind-blowing where GPT 5.5 was only at 6% and this thing is at 30%. That is, like I said, a huge leap forward in model capability. And by the way, this actually is the hardest coding benchmark out there, as far as I know. I said it's one of the hardest, but as far as I know, it is the hardest. I usually don't look at these benchmarks, but in this case, the benchmark really reflected my experience, and that's why I'm sharing the benchmarks with you. Like I said, one of the best things about the model is that it can get complex jobs done over very long periods of time. For example, this gentleman, Simon Wilson, on Hacker News, reported that he's been throwing some very difficult problems at previous models, but he's been stuck on them. But Fable 5 is able to crunch through them very quickly and happily. That just corroborates the experience that I've had in that it's a very powerful model long jobs hold together very well. Another example is Stripe. The team at Stripe said that they compressed months of engineering work into a 50 million line code base. They were able to compress that into days, which is quite mind-blowing. And my experience, again, reflects that giant leap in capability. But here's the catch, the safety filter. Like I said, it is Mythos, but with very tight safeguards and very tight safety filters. And that's a bit of a problem. Because if the model identifies your work as related to cybersecurity or bio and a few other areas, your session gets automatically rerouted to Opus 4.8. Now, it's not going to refuse your request or your prompt, but it'll pass it over to Opus 4.8 to complete. And that's probably because they know that if it is a very complex task with cybersecurity and bio risks, that Opus 4.8 wouldn't be able to pull it off the way Fable 5 is able to pull it off. One other problem, however, is that the classifier doesn't just read your prompt. It reads your entire context, your memories, connector content, etc. And so if there's anything that triggers its risk assessment from any of those sources, including its web searching, it will get you flagged and it will get you downgraded to the older model. Now, Anthropic says that this happens only 5% of the time. My experience disagrees a bit. I found it happens a lot more than 5% of the time. Although I'm pushing the limits on the types of things I'm trying to do, I'm trying to really test its capabilities across a very wide range of tasks. And so maybe that's why it fires off more than 5% for me. But GitHub issues do reflect the experience that I've had. So if you look at the GitHub issues, they also feel that the Opus fallback fires way too often. One user reported that it fired on just the word hello, which, like I said, is very likely because there were some risk identifiers in the rest of the context. So even if your prompt doesn't say something risky, if something in your context does, it'll get you bumped down to Opus. So it is a bit of a problem. There was a medical physicist who said that they cannot use Fable because the word nuclear shows up in their work. So imagine a medical physicist trying to solve a problem with MRI machines or something like that they've been struggling with Opus 4.8, but which Fable could do easily, but they can't use Fable because it has the word nuclear in it, which doesn't really make sense and isn't very fair. But that's a sign that the model is just too restrictive right now. The real number is actually in their own benchmarks. On social media, they claim less than 5%, but on coding tasks, their benchmarks show that it downgrades to Opus about 20% of the time. And this was on the terminal bench test. So 1 of 5 times in Anthropic's own testing, when it comes to more complex coding tasks, it did bump down to the older model. Mind you, though, this was just for coding tasks, complex coding tasks. Perhaps it is 5% on average when you look at all sorts of prompts and inquiries, but when it comes to coding tasks, their own benchmarks show 20%. Now, credit to Anthropic, it is something that they acknowledged. So Andrej Karpathy, now at Anthropic, he acknowledged that the model is a little bit too trigger happy when it comes to its safety filters, and that it can be tuned over time. Now, the other interesting thing is that the filter and it changing the model was actually hidden on launch. So for certain AI development topics, it would quietly degrade you to the older model without telling you. And that's where they did face a little bit of backlash. But again, to their credit, a couple of days later, they admitted they made the wrong trade-off and they made the rerouting visible. So now you will get a notice when you're bumped down to the older model. Now you can actually turn off the auto switching in settings. So the way it works right now is that it will bump you down, but it'll continue doing the work. If you don't want it to do that, if you don't want to waste tokens on the older models, then you can turn that off and perhaps retry your prompt a different way. So credit to Anthropic for the fast fix. So should you switch to Fable 5 with double the cost or half the usage as you would with Opus 4.8? I think you have to match the right model to the job. So like I said, if you got a long, hard, multi-step piece of work, and if it's been something you've been putting off because it takes too long for previous models to do, that's where Fable 5 comes in. As an example, from earlier, Stripe acknowledged that something that would take them months, even with Opus 4.8, which they had, they're now able to do in days with Fable 5. But if you're doing routine tasks, Opus 4.8 is more than powerful, and in fact, you could even use Sonnet or Haiku a lot of the times. And once again, if the filter keeps bugging you, you can turn off the auto switching, so that instead of swapping, it will pause its work. And then you can make the decision as to whether you want to continue with one of the older models or not. So my verdict is that it's definitely the best model out ever. Huge leap forward from even Opus 4.8, with one caveat, and that's the safety filter. But the capability is definitely leaps ahead of anything. Some are arguing it's AGI, but we'll see. We'll have to wait and see how it does. So if they just fix the safety filter a bit, if perhaps they put the same safety filter on it as the Opus 4.8 model, then it's hands down the best model and a very reliable model. So yes, if there's something that no model could do for you before, that's where I do recommend testing out Fable 5. And that's where you're going to feel the jump the most. Where previous models like Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5 struggled, use Fable 5 and you will really feel the leap ahead. And that's all. If you like objective, honest breakdowns like this of AI tools, please subscribe to my channel to support its growth and encourage me to make more of these videos for you guys. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.